Hi, this is Deena Thomson, author of Fallen Poppies, and this is Chapter 23. And this is Chapter 24.
Chapter 23. Do you have a boyfriend? Joanna asked the question casually as the two sisters strolled side by side. Mara Joy rolled her eyes, the skin around them crinkling in amusement, her gaze fixed on the path in front of her. I have many boyfriends and always have, she snorted, looking forward without glancing at the slouched figure beside her. The sky hung low with dark clouds, and the air was heavy, threatening rain. Pauline and Alan Michael shuffled behind the two older girls, their eyes trained on the ground below. Oh, she sighed, unaware of her response. It must be heaven. As much as she hated herself for it, Joanna envied her older sister. Mara Joy was beautiful and had so many friends, whereas she felt ugly, and her only companions were her younger sisters. Every time she became friends with someone, Mara Joy would charm them away somehow. She couldn't compete with her. Once someone met her, they were instantly drawn to the dark-haired enchantress, like a fly to sugar. They had to know her and needed to be with her. She was a natural magnet to people. It had always been that way. It sure beats hell. Mara Joy spun around in a wide circle, her bright yellow dress billowing out around her tiny waist, exposing her pink frilly panties. Why? She stopped abruptly, turning to look at Joanna. The old building seemed to glare down at them accusingly. It was dreary out, yet the light emanating from Mara Joy illuminated the street. Do you want a boyfriend, my little sister? Mara Joy smirked. Yes, Joanna remarked shyly. Boys had begun to be of interest to the young girl. She couldn't help herself. She wished boys would pay just half the attention to her that they did to Mara Joy. Is that so? Mara Joy piped in. Isn't that sweet? Little Joanna wants a beau. Joanna's head snapped up, her eyes squinting in anger. Why is that so hard to believe? Is it so difficult to think that maybe other people have interests that don't revolve around you? She belted out unexpectedly. Mara Joy stood with her mouth gaping open, taken aback. Joanna was always so defensive with her, ready to attack whenever she opened her mouth. What on earth are you talking about? I swear you are getting weirder and weirder all the time. She squared her shoulders, narrowing her eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. You definitely won't be catching any men with that pissy frame of mind, she said. She shook her head. And trust me, you will need everything you've got as it is. Her gaze was unflinching, her demeanor unwavering. She was determined to not let the little twit get the best of her. Joanna felt her face flush red. She had done it again and walked right into her sister's hands. Well, we can't all be Mama's favorite now, can we? Joanna burst out, walking away coldly, leaving Mara Joy standing alone, smirking. Oh, come on! Quit being such a baby! Mara Joy yelled, running after her. She reached out and grabbed her arm, swinging Joanna around to face her. Ferocious green eyes clashed with cold, icy blue ones. Neither girl said a word. Alan Michael, seeing the two girls braced for combat, ran forward to stop whatever was about to happen next. History had proven to him that once Mara Joy and Joanna started to fight, it would be very hard to stop them. His thoughts jumbled as he ran full speed ahead, colliding with Joanna and falling hard on the ground like a sack of potatoes. Unaware of anything going on, Pauline walked blindly into Alan Michael, stumbling over him. Joanna caught her in time before she fell face first onto their shrieking brother, whose painful cries filled the air. See what you have done? Mara Joy bellowed, tossing her long curly hair out of her blazing eyes. Me? Joanna thundered, clutching Pauline close to her chest. Yes, you. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't said those horrible things about Mama. Mara Joy felt hot tears well up in her eyes, but didn't bother wiping them away. Joanna wanted to scream. Even when she was crying, she looked beautiful. More so, it seemed. "Why?" she shouted in her head. "Why is Mara Joy so exquisite while I am so unbecoming?" She shook her head and looked at the whimpering Alan Michael, the boy her mother always wanted. His little knees were scraped up raw and bleeding. "I'll take him home," Joanna said, lifting the burly 7-year-old boy up. "Oh, no, you won't. I will," Mara Joy stormed. She grabbed Alan Michael's arm from Joanna, forming a tug-of-war, the child caught in the middle. "I don't want you near my baby brother. You're too much of an animal." She gave a good yank and felt Joanna release her grip on Alan Michael's other arm. Mara Joy hiked the husky boy into her arms as he continued to howl in her ear. Over her shoulder, she stuck out her tongue at Joanna. Alan Michael's cries pierced the air, echoing off the nearby buildings as Mara Joy struggled to hold his heavy body in her arms as she trudged down the street, her feet dragging with each step. "That mindless little bitch," she fumed, patting her brother's back. Snot ran down his nose and he began to breathe heavily between wails. She placed him down on the ground and grabbed the sleeve of his sweater, wiping the mess from his nose, leaving a line of slime across his freshly cleaned sleeve. "I can just imagine the lies she would tell Mama if she'd brought you home," she seethed between clenched teeth. With red-rimmed eyes, Alan Michael observed his sister. His wails turned to whimpering hiccups. He loved Mara Joy, adored her. "What are you going to do, sissy?" he sniffed. His knees stung, and he felt like crying again as he walked quickly beside Mara Joy, clutching her hand obediently. "Oh, don't you worry, baby brother. I will get her for what she said," Mara Joy said as she smiled at the small boy. His green eyes, similar to the other siblings, twinkled admiringly at her. Joanna and Pauline stood silently together, staring after Mara Joy and Alan Michael. She felt like screaming as she watched her sister's perfect body struggle to carry the thick-set little boy. Mara Joy's black hair cascaded over her shoulders and down her back in a luscious mane. Alan Michael's straight, thick brown hair flickered with every bounce of Mara Joy's step. How different she looked compared to the rest of them. They all looked similar to each other. Joanna and Alan Michael had gold-streaked brown hair just like their mother. Constance was a pale, soft-curled blonde, just like the grandmother she was named for. Her mother said she was the image of the original Constance. Pauline had rustic flecked hair like their father. They all had the same strange green eyes as him, a trademark of Alan, their mother said, that dominated their faces. The 3 girls had their mother's thin figure, whereas Alan Michael took after their father's stocky, muscular build. The 4 younger children of Alan and JoBeth had a unique look to each of them, but all had resembled both of their parents a little, all of them except Mara Joy. Mara Joy, with her black curly hair and penetrating blue eyes, resembled none. Joanna's stomach began to flip-flop as she remembered the conversation that could not help but haunt her. The conversation she overheard the night Uncle Oliver and Aunt Shauna were moving away. She couldn't remember everything clearly, but remembered a woman's name. Tamara. Tamara had a baby with Oliver, a baby Mama and Pappy felt they deserved. She also remembered a few years later how Uncle Carter had mistaken Mara Joy for Uncle Oliver's daughter. She felt very confused, as she always did when thinking of these events. There was something strange about her family, but Joanna was afraid to place her finger on it. If what she had pieced together was true, her whole life was a lie, and her mother's behavior toward her even more of a cruel mystery. "Let's go, or we'll be late for school," Pauline interrupted, pulling on Joanna's shirt. "Sorry." She turned to her 9-year-old sister and began walking, clutching her books tightly to her chest. "I have to find out the truth," she whispered to herself, ignoring Pauline running beside her. "If it is the last thing I do." Chapter 24. "Mama! Mama!" Mara Joy stormed through the house with Alan Michael in her arms. Her eyes darted from one room to the next, searching for her mother. Alan Michael weighed heavily in her arms, and she desperately wanted to put him down, but not until her mother saw them. "Mama!" she screeched. "What is it?" Jo Beth's heart pounded wildly in her chest as she heard her daughter's desperate plea. Fear gripped her like a vice, and every dark possibility flooded her mind. Her trembling fingers clutched at the banister as she hurtled down the stairs. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, that some monstrous force was closing in on her and her family. Even after 15 years of calm, she knew that the world was cruel and unforgiving. Life had taught her that there was no such thing as safety and that anything could happen any time. Entering the doorway, Jo Beth came face to face with Mara Joy. She stopped dead in her tracks, her body numb with horror. Mara Joy stood clutching Jo Beth's only living son in her arms. Both were covered in blood. Her heart jumped, and she thought she might faint. She ran to Mara Joy, snatched Alan Michael from the young girl's trembling arms, and examined him quickly, searching for broken bones and punctured flesh. Alan Michael cried loudly, confused by his mother's frantic behavior. "What happened?" she asked Mara Joy, trembling and hugging Alan Michael close to her throbbing heart. After a thorough examination, she couldn't find anything wrong with her boy. It must be internal. Maybe he was bleeding to death from the inside. "It was awful." Mara Joy wiped her nose. She reached out and caressed Alan Michael's damp head. "Joanna was being so nasty." She paused for dramatic effect and continued when Jo Beth's full attention was focused on her. "Mama, that girl was saying horrible things about you, saying you don't love her. When I told her to stop her ridiculous talk, she turned on me and knocked baby Mikey onto the ground. Just look at his poor knees." It was becoming all too apparent that this was the source of the blood covering the two children. "They are scraped raw," Mara Joy began to sob. "And she said such mean, horrible things about you," she continued as she followed her mother into the washroom. Jo Beth, relieved to know that Alan Michael's injuries were superficial, began to clean his wounds. Alan Michael continued to cry, his cuts stinging painfully as his mother rinsed them with disinfectant. Now, my sweet, it's over with," Jo Beth cooed to her son. She reached for a damp face cloth resting on the sink's rim and began to clean his tear-streaked face. "But to hurt poor baby Mikey," Mara Joy continued, lifting her swollen face to her mother. Her blue eyes were puffy from crying, causing them to stand out even more brilliantly from her flushed face. "It's just so terrible to take her anger out on him. He is just a baby after all." She patted the boy's shoulder. He shivered and let out a slobbery sigh. "I'll have a talk with Joanna when she comes home. Stop crying, dear." Jo Beth got up from doctoring Alan Michael's knees. It seemed his wounds were a lot less serious than Mara Joy believed. She looked at her forlorn daughter and walked out of the washroom, only to return shortly with a fresh dress for her. "But, Mama, it hurts me to hear her say that you don't love her like the rest of us," Mara Joy whined, taking the clean outfit and walking into the hallway to dress. It was a narrow hall, but she wanted to be near enough to speak to her mother. The room she shared with Joanna was down the corridor, and she would have to yell at the top of her lungs for her mother to hear her. "Well, I don't understand that girl. She knows that isn't the truth." JoBeth shook her head, helping Alan Michael to change into clean clothes. Joanna was a constant thorn in her side. The girl seemed to always be at odds with everyone. She didn't know what to do with her anymore. "I will write a note for you and baby Michael. After you have finished dressing, both of you can return to school." "All right, but if this keeps up, I don't know what I'll do." Mara Joy zipped up her dress. She walked back to the washroom and looked into the mirror, frowning at her puffy eyes. She turned the cold tap on and splashed water onto her face. JoBeth placed a comforting hand on her back. "Don't worry, love. It won't happen again," JoBeth said, smiling into the mirror. It hurt her to see Mara Joy so upset. Anger filled her. Joanna was pushing things a little too far. Her behavior was getting out of control. This jealousy towards her sister had to come to an end. She pulled free the hair trapped in Mara Joy's collar, letting the curls tumble down her shoulders. "Now, get to school. I will deal with your sister later." Mara Joy smiled brightly into the mirror, her sapphire eyes sparkling. "I love you, Mama." She turned and wrapped her arms around JoBeth's waist. "I love you too, my darling girl." JoBeth sighed, hugging Mara Joy back. "Me too," Alan Michael interrupted, sitting on the toilet. He jumped off, his knees forgotten, and ran over to JoBeth, seizing her leg in a bear hug. She bent down and untangled the child from her leg, lifting him up into her arms. "Yes, you too." She planted a kiss on his warm cheek. "You too, my precious little boy." Mara Joy flashed a smile, her eyes twinkling mischievously as she leaned over JoBeth's shoulder. She kissed his other cheek quickly, causing the boy to let out an excited giggle, his face lighting up with joy.